Another challenge to sustainability is carrying capacity. So I indirectly referenced this earlier when I talked about prioritizing the economic and the social pillars of sustainability, and then finding that your environment can no longer support you. Well, carrying capacity is one of the issues that we run into with the environment if we put too many demands upon it. So carrying capacity is when we're talking about or how it pertains to sustainability is the needs and wants of an economy cannot trespass the land's carrying capacity. So carrying capacity is how much a certain system can replenish itself over time. A really good example of um, a situation where the carrying capacity of a system was overtaxed is the collapse of the Atlantic cod fisheries. Some of you might have heard about this, but today it's less well known. Certainly, I remember when it happened. It was 1992 when the moratorium was put into place. Now, the problems with the Atlantic cod fisheries go far back, way further back than 1992, but everything came to a head when the government put a moratorium on fishing Atlantic cod. So the Atlantic cod fisheries have likely existed for thousands of years. Certainly Europeans have fished the Atlantic coast for cod for approximately 500 years, and the cod fisheries have supported their communities on the East Coast for that time. In a very significant way. But prior to that, of course, the indigenous peoples of the East Coast also relied upon the cod fisheries, and everything was fine and dandy until the 1960s. During the 1960s, fishers moved to larger boats, trawlers, that were equipped with radar and electronic navigation systems and sonar. So these technological advances allowed fishers to pursue enormous numbers of fish at these unprecedented rates. In addition to that, there were also pressures upon the fisheries by international fishers as well, because of course ships were able to travel much further and had these longer ranges and had the capacity to keep their catches cold and travel over long distance and had big hulls and all of these things. So essentially, the real strains were placed upon the cod fisheries when technology advanced and really expanded the numbers of the catch. So these technologies affected the northern cod population in two ways. First of all, by increasing the area and depth that was fished, as well as, of course, the numbers of catch, just, in general, the numbers of the catch, the cod were being depleted until the surviving fish could not replenish the stock lost each year. The other way that this impacted the fisheries was that the trawlers caught enormous amounts of non-commercial fish. These were economically unimportant fish, but very important ecologically. So incidental catch undermines the whole ecosystem, depleting stocks of important predator and prey species. With the northern cod, significant numbers of capelin were caught as bycatch. So capelin is an important prey species for the cod. So that's their food. If they don't have food, if the capelin is fished accidentally and as a result dies, then when a primary food source of the cod is taken out of the ecosystem. So this was enormously damaging to the populations of the cod. So this went on, this, kind of started in the 50s where, things changed significantly. And over time, the fish were depleted, the stocks were depleted to the point where they reached roughly 1% of their previous biomass. So this was an unsustainable population. Now, certain legislation had been put into effect to try to curb this overfishing, but nothing really meaningful. So the problem was that cod fisheries were not only economically important to the people of the East Coast, extraordinarily economically important, but they were also part of their cultural and social identities. So for many families, the cod fisheries absolutely represented their whole livelihoods. And most families were either connected directly or indirectly with the fishery. And this impacted the economy on the East Coast in a multiple number of ways. I mean, there were the plant workers and the sellers and the transporters and employees and small businesses, related businesses, both foreign and domestic businesses that had invested heavily into things like boats and equipment and infrastructure and all of these things. So this was a huge deal to put limitations on these fisheries. So it was one of those problems that was kicked down the road by successive governments, because it was, one of these sticky things that no one really wanted to deal with, because they knew that the political backlash would be extraordinary. So this all came to a head in 1992 when the inevitable happened, and no more procrastination was possible. Something had to be done. The fisheries were collapsing, and so the federal government, under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, declared a moratorium, a complete moratorium on cod fishing in 1992. Now, the thought was at the time, and I remember this, that this moratorium would go on for a couple years. A couple years passed and the stocks didn't recover. 5 years passed and the stocks didn't recover. 10 years passed and the stocks didn't recover. The moratorium is still in place. And the fisheries are only just recovering. I believe that there is a small amount of recreational fishing allowed. And there's been talks recently of opening up the cod fisheries again. So you can see that ultimately, who suffered? Well, the cod suffered, obviously, and the ecosystem suffered, but the fishers suffered more than anyone else. And the Newfoundland economy suffered just in an extraordinary fashion. And many of you might be familiar with this, that Newfoundland's economy has not been doing well for quite some time and is only just starting to improve for other reasons. So, what could have been done differently? How could we have respected environmental sustainability and the carrying capacity of the land so that the ecosystem didn't collapse, so that the fishers did not lose their livelihood, so that Newfoundland did not go into this major economic slump back in the 90s? What could have been done differently? Well, long-term thinking, foresight, support for the fisheries, larger reductions earlier on that, yes, would have been painful, but not as painful as the eventual moratorium. So be thinking about those kinds of trade-offs that we need to make if we want to have sustainable futures. That's what it's all about, really. Now, please go to the video that I've posted. I think you'll find it particularly interesting. It takes you back to a time nearly 30 years ago, and you can kind of see the zeitgeist of 1992 when these decisions were being made. It's kind of a fascinating look into Canadian history. You don't need to watch the whole video unless you want to, but certainly the first few minutes are very interesting.